The pregnant Black Widow collapsed in the Texas dust. Water buckets scattered like broken dreams around her swollen form. Serafina Beaumont had walked 5 miles through scorching heat, same as every day for 3 months since Isaiah died. The vultures circled overhead, patient as undertakers. Her vision blurred. The sun pressed down like a furnace lid. 7 months of carrying this child, 3 months of carrying water, and her body finally surrendered to the impossible mathematics of survival. Hoofbeats thundered across the hardpan. A shadow fell across her face, cool as mercy. Tobias Whitmore, dismounted before his horse stopped moving. He'd watched his woman's daily pilgrimage from his ridge for weeks, each journey carving deeper into his conscience. The sight of her collapsed form struck him like a physical blow. He knelt beside her, lifting her head with gentle hands. Her dark skin burned with fever. Her lips cracked and pale. The child in her belly pressed against fabric worn thin as hope. Water from his canteen touched her mouth. She stirred, eyes fluttering open to meet his brown eyes, deep as well water, carrying depths he couldn't fathom. "You're safe now," he whispered. She tried to sit up, failed. Tried again, with the stubborn grace that had captivated him from a distance. This close, her strength felt like standing near a forge. Hot and elemental, and somehow dangerous. "The water," she managed. "Forget the water." The words escaped before he could stop them. The proposal that had been building in his chest for weeks, growing stronger each time he watched her struggle. "Marry me." Her eyes widened. The desert wind carried dust between them, settling on their skin like witness powder. "Marry me, and you'll never carry another bucket of water again." Serafina stared at this strange white man with his clean clothes and soft hands. The sun behind his head made him look like a fever dream. Maybe he was. Maybe she'd finally broken under the weight of her circumstances, and conjured salvation from thin air. But his canteen was real. The water was real. The gentle way he supported her shoulders felt real as anything she'd ever known. "Yes," she whispered, then fainted against his chest. Tobias carried her to his ranch house, her weight slight as a broken bird in his arms. The child shifted inside her as he walked, and he felt the kick against his ribs like a small fist, demanding justice. She woke in a bed softer than anything she'd known since childhood. Clean sheets. A pitcher of water on the nightstand. Sunlight streaming through actual glass windows, not the oiled paper that covered her cabin's gaps. "You came back," she said when he entered, carrying a tray of food. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She studied his face, looking for the lie that must be hiding there. White men didn't marry black women. Not in Texas. Not anywhere decent folk gathered. The proposal had to be fever dreams and desperation. But he knelt beside the bed, eyes steady as stone. "I meant what I said out there. You don't know me. I know you walk 10 miles every day to keep yourself and that baby alive. I know you haven't missed a single day since your husband died. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met." The words hung between them like a bridge neither quite dared cross. "Your family won't stand for it," she said. "My family doesn't get to choose who I love." Love. The word landed heavy as a stone in still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she understood about her situation. Before she could respond, boots hammered across the front porch. The door exploded open without ceremony. Cornelius Whitmore filled the frame like a storm cloud, his face twisted with rage that made the air shimmer. "What in tarnation is this nonsense, boy?" Tobias rose slowly, placing himself between his father and the bed. "Mind your manners. There's a lady present." Lady Cornelius spat. "That's Isaiah Beaumont's widow. The one been squatting on my water rights." Sarah felt ice form in her chest. Water rights. The phrase connected to half-remembered conversations, to Isaiah's worried face in the weeks before he died. "She's going to be my wife," Tobias said. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Cornelius stared at his son, like he'd sprouted horns. Then his gaze shifted to Sarah, calculating and cold. "You marry that woman, you lose everything. The ranch, the cattle, your inheritance. Every dollar of Whitmore money. Then I'll make my own money." "With what?" "Your pretty face and soft hands." Cornelius laughed, sharp as breaking glass. "You wouldn't last a week without family backing." Sarah pushed herself upright, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to topple her. "I can take care of myself. Don't need anyone's charity." "Charity?" Cornelius turned that calculating stare back to her. "Girl, you got no idea what you're walking into. This marriage will get you both killed." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. Sarah had heard whispers about the Whitmore family, about their methods of handling problems, about accidents that befell people who stood in their way, about mining accidents that claimed inconvenient husbands. Get out, Tobias said quietly. Think about what you're throwing away, son. Think real hard. Cornelius left, but his presence lingered like the smell of sulfur. Sarah watched Tobias's face, seeing the war between love and loyalty playing out in the set of his jaw. He's right about one thing, she said. This marriage could destroy us both. Then we'll be destroyed together. The conviction in his voice sent warmth through her chest. Dangerous warmth. The kind that made a woman forget caution and reach for impossible things. 3 days later, they stood before Reverend Mills in the small wooden church at the edge of town. The pews sat empty, except for Clay Mitchell, Tobias's foreman, and Mama Rosie, who'd raised Ciro after her parents died. Mama Rosie had tried to talk her out of it, had warned her that the Whitmores were dangerous, that Isaiah's death might not have been the accident everyone claimed. But standing beside Tobias, feeling his steady presence like an anchor in rough seas, Sarah chose hope over fear. The Reverend's words blurred together until they reached the important part. The part that would bind them together in the eyes of God and law. Do you, Tobias Whitmore, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Serafina Beaumont, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The church door slammed open before she could answer. Armed men poured through the entrance, their faces hidden behind bandanas. Sheriff Polk followed, his badge catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. This ceremony is illegal, Polk announced. Step away from the woman, Whitmore. Tobias moved closer, to Sarah instead. Show me the law that says so. Miscegenation statutes, look them up. Those laws don't apply to free people. They apply to whoever I say they apply to. The standoff stretched like a held breath. Sarah felt the baby move restlessly inside her, responding to her racing heartbeat. Everything balanced on the edge of a knife. Cornelius Whitmore appeared in the doorway, holding a folded document like a weapon. Sign this, son. Renounce the marriage before it's legal, and we can forget this foolishness ever happened. Tobias took the papers, read them slowly while everyone waited. The silence grew heavy as storm clouds. Then he tore the document in half. I do, he said, looking directly at Sarah. Now and always. He kissed her as the pieces of his father's ultimatum fluttered to the floor like snow. The kiss tasted of defiance and hope, and the metallic tang of danger. Warning shots cracked through the air outside. The message was clear as thunder. This isn't over, Cornelius said, his voice carrying the weight of a promise and a threat. Sarah pulled back from her husband's embrace, meeting his eyes. She saw her own determination reflected there, along with something that might have been love, or might have been madness. Either way, there was no turning back now. She was Mrs. Tobias Whitmore, for better or worse, in a world that would try to destroy them both for the crime of choosing each other. The war for their survival had officially begun. The Whitmore mansion rose from the prairie like a monument. 2 things Sarah had never dared want. 3 stories of polished wood and glass windows that caught the morning light and threw it back in golden sheets. Her reflection stared back from those windows. A pregnant black woman in a world built for neither. Tobias carried her belongings himself. 2 canvas bags that held everything she owned. The house staff watched from doorways and corners, their faces carefully neutral. Sarah read the questions in their eyes, the calculations running behind their MEASURED, politeness. Clay Mitchell stepped forward first. The ranch foreman was older than Tobias, weathered by sun and wind into something solid as oak. He removed his hat when he spoke to her. Ma'am, anything you need, you just say the word. His respect felt genuine. Sarah nodded, throat too tight for words. Kindness from unexpected places could break a person faster than cruelty. The East Wing is yours, Tobias said, leading her upstairs that didn't creak under their weight. Your own sitting room, bedroom, private entrance if you want it. The rooms were larger than her entire cabin. Furniture that looked like it belonged in magazines. A bed big enough for a family, covered in quilts that probably cost more than she'd made in a year. It's too much, she whispered. It's not enough. He left her alone to settle in. The silence pressed against her ears, after months of wind whistling through cabin gaps. She sat on the bed's edge, hands folded over her swollen belly, and tried to understand what her life had become. The baby kicked, restless. It knew something had changed, could feel the shift in her heartbeat. Sarah placed both palms against her ribs, feeling the small life that had kept her walking when everything else wanted to lie down and surrender. We're safe now, she told the child. Maybe. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A black woman entered, older than Sarah by 20 years. carrying a tray of tea and fresh bread. Her presence felt like finding water in the desert. "I'm Bethany," the woman said. "Midwife. Mr. Tobias asked me to look after you." Sarah studied her face, looking for judgment or pity. Found neither. Just professional assessment, the way a craftsman might examine their tools. "How far along?" 7 months, maybe 8. Bethany nodded, setting down the tray. "Baby's sitting high. Probably a boy. Strong heartbeat." She checked Sarah's pulse, examined her hands and feet for swelling. Her touch was gentle but thorough, the hands of someone who'd brought life into the world many times over. "You've been working too hard," Bethany said. "Body's tired. But you're strong. Baby's strong. Rest now. Let others carry the weight for a while." The permission to rest felt revolutionary. Sarah had been carrying weight since Isaiah died. Before that even. The weight of survival, of protecting the child inside her, of walking miles through dust and heat because stopping meant dying. "Is it safe here?" Sarah asked. Bethany's hands stilled. She looked toward the window, where the vast Whitmore lands stretched to the horizon. "Safe as anywhere for people like us. Maybe safer, with Mr. Tobias watching over you, and his father. Mr. Cornelius is angry, but he loves his son. That might be enough. Might be." The words carried the weight of uncertainty, of a future balanced on the edge of maybe. Days passed, in careful quiet. Cyril explored the house, learning its rhythms. The staff treated her with distant respect, following Tobias's lead. She ate meals that filled her stomach, slept in a bed that didn't let in rain. The baby grew calm, responding to her lower stress with less restless movement. But comfort brought its own fears. She'd grown used to struggle, to the clear mathematics of survival. This ease felt temporary, a gift that could be snatched away without warning. Clay Mitchell found her on the front porch one evening, watching the sun set over the endless grassland. He sat beside her without invitation, hat in his hands. "Been thinking about your husband," he said. Sarah's spine straightened. "What about him? That mining accident never sat right with me." The words hung between them like smoke. Sarah had wondered the same thing in the dark hours before dawn, when grief and suspicion tangled together, until she couldn't tell one from the other. "Isaiah was careful," she said. "Knew those mines better than anyone." "Exactly." Clay's voice dropped lower. "Been asking questions. Quiet ones. Found some things that don't add up." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Mine records, showing the tunnel where Isaiah died. The dates didn't match the official story. The safety inspections that should have happened didn't. The witnesses who should have been there weren't. Someone wanted that tunnel to collapse," Clay said. "Question is why?" Sarah stared at the papers, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. If Isaiah was murdered, then everything changed. Her marriage to Tobias wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. Who would want him dead? "That's what I aimed to find out." The investigation became their secret. Clay asked questions while Sarah listened at doorways, learning the house's patterns. She discovered that the Whitmore empire had enemies, business partners who smiled at dinner and sharpened knives in private. Banker Lewis Ford visited often, his pale eyes lingering on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He spoke of her property with casual interest, mentioning how worthless that dry land was, how she'd be better off selling it for whatever price she could get. "No water, no minerals, no future," he said over dinner. "Just dust and rocks and heartbreak." But Isaiah had loved that land, had spent his last weeks walking its boundaries, testing soil, examining rock formations. He'd been excited about something, talking about their future in whispers that made her heart race with possibility. Sheriff Polk began making regular visits to the ranch, ostensibly social calls that felt more like threats. He spoke to Tobias about the marriage, about the complications it caused, about how some problems had ways of solving themselves. "Accidents happen," Polk said, his meaning clear as gunfire, "especially to folks who don't know their place." The words followed Sarah through the house, echoing in her dreams. She found herself checking locks, testing windows, mapping escape routes through rooms that had felt like sanctuary. The pressure built slowly, like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. Cornelius Whitmore's visits became more frequent, his arguments with Tobias more heated. Their voices carried through the walls, sharp with anger and disappointment. "You're destroying everything I built," Cornelius said one night. 3 generations of Whitmore legacy, thrown away for what? Infatuation. Guilt. "For love," Tobias replied. "Something you never understood. Love doesn't pay debts. Love doesn't protect land. Love doesn't keep you alive when your enemies come calling. The conversation ended with slamming doors and rattling windows. Sarah felt the baby respond to her racing heartbeat, kicking restlessly against her ribs. Clay's investigation deepened. He found irregularities in mining contracts, payments that didn't match records, safety violations that were mysteriously overlooked. A pattern emerged, pointing toward corruption that went deeper than simple negligence. Your husband found something, Clay told her, something worth killing for. The revelation came with a new discovery. Clay had been testing soil samples from Sarah's property, following Isaiah's notes and measurements. The results changed everything. Gold, not just traces, but a substantial vein running through the land Isaiah had died trying to protect. The worthless property that banker Ford kept trying to buy was actually worth a fortune. Isaiah knew, Sarah whispered. That's why he was so excited. That's why he died. The pieces fell together with terrible clarity. The mining accident that wasn't an accident. The sabotaged well that forced her to walk miles for water. The constant pressure to sell land that everyone claimed was worthless. Someone had killed her husband for gold, then tried to kill her slowly through thirst and exhaustion. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to her anger. Sarah placed her hands over her belly, feeling the life that Isaiah had died trying to protect. Their child would inherit that gold, that land, that legacy of love and sacrifice, if they lived long enough. At 8 months pregnant, Sarah's world contracted to careful movements and measured breaths. The baby sat heavy and low, making walking difficult. Bethany checked on her daily, monitoring the child's position and heartbeat. Soon, Bethany said, maybe a week, maybe less. That evening, Sarah sat with Tobias on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The vastness of the prairie stretched around them, beautiful and indifferent to human struggles. Do you regret it? She asked. The marriage, what it's cost you. Tobias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of certainty. I regret that you had to suffer alone. I regret that I didn't find you sooner. I regret that loving you puts you in danger. He turned to face her. But I don't regret making you my wife. The words settled into her chest like warmth. Despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and looming threats, she believed him. The tea tasted wrong. Sarah noticed it immediately, the bitter undertone that made her stomach clench. She set down the cup, but the damage was done. Within minutes, her vision blurred, her hands shook. The baby thrashed frantically inside her, responding to whatever poison was flooding her system. Bethany found her collapsed on the sitting room floor, convulsing and barely conscious. The midwife's training took over, checking pulse and pupils, forcing Sarah to drink water and honey to dilute whatever she'd consumed. Not enough to kill, Bethany said grimly. Just enough to weaken. Someone wants you sick, not dead. The realization was almost worse than death. Someone wanted to incapacitate her, to make her helpless and dependent. The independence she'd fought so hard to maintain was being systematically destroyed. While Sarah recovered, fire lit up the night sky. Her old homestead burned. The cabin where she'd lived with Isaiah reduced to ash and memory. When the flames died, investigators found evidence planted in the ruins, papers suggesting Tobias had ordered the burning to cover up his family's crimes. The sheriff arrived at dawn with a warrant. Tobias was arrested for arson and conspiracy, his calm dignity intact even with shackles on his wrists. He met Sarah's eyes as they led him away, and she saw no fear there, only determination. Find the truth, he said, whatever it takes. Alone, in the vast house, Sarah felt the walls closing in. The servants watched her with new wariness, uncertain whether she was victim or accomplice. Cornelius Whitmore prowled the edges of her vision, waiting for her to break. The baby dropped lower, pressing against her pelvis with increasing urgency. Bethany estimated days, maybe hours, before labor began. Sarah faced the possibility of giving birth without Tobias, of raising their child in a world that had already tried to destroy them both. But she wasn't the same desperate woman who'd collapsed in the desert months ago. Marriage to Tobias had given her more than safety and comfort. It had given her purpose, allies, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was worth fighting for. The truth about Isaiah's death was within reach. The gold beneath her land could secure her child's future. Justice for her husband could protect her new family. All she had to do was survive long enough to claim it. The baby kicked again, strong and insistent. Sarah placed her hands over her belly, feeling the life that connected her to Isaiah's memory and Tobias's hope. Whatever came next, She would face it with the strength of two loves and the promise of a future worth fighting for. The war for her family's survival was just beginning. Sarah stared at the jail cell bars that held her husband captive. The iron cast shadows across Tobias's face, making him look older, worn by the weight of false accusations. His hands rested calm on his knees. Despite the shackles, even imprisoned, he carried himself with quiet dignity. They planted evidence, she said through the bars. I know. We'll prove your innocence. We'll prove the truth. That's more important. The distinction mattered. Truth meant exposing Isaiah's murder, uncovering the gold conspiracy, revealing the network of corruption that had destroyed one husband and now threatened another. Innocence was just the beginning. Clay Mitchell waited outside the jailhouse, hat pulled low against the morning sun. His weathered face held the grim satisfaction of a man who'd found what he was looking for. Got something, he said quietly. About the tea. They walked to his horse, where saddlebags held more than supplies. Clay produced a small glass vial, the kind used by the town doctor. Inside, white powder clung to the sides. Found this in Mrs. Harrington's kitchen garden. Same bitter smell as what you described. Judge Harrington's wife. The woman who smiled at church socials while poisoning pregnant women. The respectability of evil never ceased to amaze Sarah. She admitted anything, didn't have to. Her kitchen girl talked plenty. Mrs. Harrington promised her freedom papers if she delivered the tea. Said you were dangerous. Needed to be weakened for everyone's safety. Freedom papers. The promise used to control those who had nothing left to lose. Sarah understood desperation well enough to forgive the kitchen girl. The woman who exploited that desperation deserved no such mercy. What else did she say? That Mrs. Harrington was promised your land. Soon as you were gone, she'd get first rights to purchase. The conspiracy expanded with each revelation. Not just murder and theft, but a coordinated effort involving the town's most respected citizens. The judge, the sheriff, the banker. Pillars of the community built on foundations of blood and gold. Mama Rosie appeared at the mercantile, carrying a cloth bundle that clinked with hidden contents. Her ancient eyes held fire that age couldn't dim. She'd been gathering evidence of her own, using connections that went back generations. Found these in the church basement, she said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal mine documents, hidden behind the altar, if you can believe the blasphemy. The papers told a story of systematic fraud, safety inspections that never happened, witness statements that contradicted each other, payment records that showed money changing hands, in all the wrong directions. Isaiah's signature appeared on several documents, but the handwriting was wrong. Someone had forged his name on agreements he'd never seen, contracts that signed away his rights to the very land he'd died protecting. They were planning this for months, Sarah said, studying the dates. Maybe years. Your husband got suspicious. Mama Rosie replied, started asking questions they couldn't answer, so they silenced him permanent. The baby shifted restlessly inside Sarah, responding to her elevated heartbeat. At 8.5 months, the child seemed eager to escape the womb and enter the world that had already tried to kill it twice. Sarah placed protective hands over her swollen belly. Easy now, she whispered. Not yet. But time was running short. Labor could begin any day, and she needed answers before vulnerability made her helpless again. Motherhood would be a gift to her enemies, a weakness they could exploit. Clay's investigation had uncovered financial records that pointed toward banker Ford. Money flowing from the Whitmore accounts to mining companies that existed only on paper. Investments in properties that produced nothing but provided convenient ways to hide stolen gold. Ford's been skimming for years, Clay explained, using Cornelius's reputation to legitimize fake ventures. Your husband's discovery threatened to expose everything, so they killed him, and tried to kill you slow. Make it look natural. A pregnant widow who couldn't handle the strain. The methodical cruelty took Sarah's breath away. They'd turned her grief into a weapon, used her love for Isaiah as a tool of destruction. The daily water walks weren't just about survival. They were about breaking her spirit 1 mile at a time. Ranch hands loyal to Tobias began sharing information. They'd seen Ford meeting with Sheriff Polk after dark, witnessed money changing hands behind the saloon, heard conversations about problems that needed solving and accidents that could be arranged. The evidence mounted, but proving it meant staying alive long enough to present it. Sarah felt eyes watching her everywhere she went. Shadows moved wrong. Horses shied at sounds that shouldn't be there. Someone was planning something. Ford himself provided the answer. He appeared at the ranch one evening, dressed in his finest clothes, and carrying flowers that mocked the gravity of his visit. His pale eyes held the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. "Heard about your troubles," he said, settling into the parlor chair without invitation. "Terrible thing. Husband in jail. Baby coming soon. All alone in this big house." Ciro remained standing, using her height to maintain whatever advantage she could manage. The baby pressed against her ribs, making breathing difficult, but she kept her voice steady. "Tobias will be cleared of all charges. Maybe, maybe not. Evidence has a way of multiplying when the right people want it to." Ford smiled, showing teeth that belonged on a predator. "But I'm here to help." Help. The word carried poison worse than anything Mrs. Harrington could brew. "Don't need help. Everyone needs help, Mrs. Whitmore. Especially women in your condition." Ford leaned forward, his voice dropping to mock intimacy. "I could make the charges disappear, get your husband released, ensure your child is born into a world of safety and prosperity. What's the price?" "Smart woman. I always admired intelligence." Ford reached into his coat, producing legal documents already prepared for signature. "Simple transfer of property rights. Your worthless land, in exchange for my protection." Worthless land. The lie came so easily, he probably believed it himself. Sarah glanced at the papers, seeing her death warrant disguised as a business transaction. "Need time to think." "Time's a luxury you don't have. Sheriff Polk is planning another search of this house tomorrow. Might find more evidence against your husband. Might find evidence against you. Terrible shame if that baby was born in a jail cell." The threat was clear as a slap. Sign over the land, or watch her family destroyed piece by piece. Ford had orchestrated every move, from Isaiah's murder to Tobias's arrest, to this final checkmate. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed she was the same desperate woman who'd collapsed in the desert months ago. The woman who'd take any offer, pay any price, sacrifice anything for survival. "I'll consider your generous offer," Sarah said. Ford smiled, confident in victory. "Wise choice. I'll return tomorrow for your answer." After he left, Sarah sat in the gathering darkness and planned. Not surrender, but war. Not submission, but justice. The baby kicked hard, and she took it as encouragement. Labor began that night. The contractions started as Ford's carriage disappeared into darkness. Sarah felt the familiar tightening across her belly, the deep pressure that meant her child was ready to enter the world. Bethany had warned her this might happen. Stress could trigger early labor, and she'd been carrying enough stress to birth twins. She made it to her bedroom before the pain intensified, gripped the bedpost as waves of sensation rolled through her body. The baby was coming whether the world was ready or not. Bethany arrived within the hour, summoned by a ranch hand who'd been watching for signs. The midwife took one look at Sarah's face and began preparing for a long night. "First babies take their time," Bethany said, arranging supplies with practiced efficiency. "But this one seems eager." Between contractions, Sarah managed to explain about Ford's visit, the ultimatum, the trap closing around them. Bethany listened while checking the baby's position, her face growing grim with understanding. "He's planning something for tomorrow," Sarah gasped as another wave hit. "When I'm helpless, then we best make sure you're not helpless." But helpless was exactly what Sarah became as labor progressed. Her body took control, focused entirely on the monumental task of bringing life into the world. Hours passed in a blur of pain and effort, and the primitive satisfaction of doing what women had done since time began. Dawn was breaking when Ford returned, earlier than promised and accompanied by armed men. They found Sarah in the first stage of labor, vulnerable and unable to run. Bethany met them at the front door, blocking their path with nothing but moral authority. "Woman's birthing," Bethany said firmly. "You got no business here. I have business with Mrs. Whitmore. She has documents to sign. She has a baby to birth. Everything else can wait." Ford pushed past Bethany with casual violence. His men followed, filling the house with hostile presence. They found Sarah in her bedroom, gripping the bedframe as contractions peaked and subsided. "Perfect timing," Ford said, producing the papers again. "Sign these, and I'll ensure you have the finest medical care. Refuse, and you'll birth that child in a jail cell." Sarah looked at the documents through eyes hazed with pain. Her signature would complete the theft that had started with Isaiah's murder. Her child would inherit nothing but the knowledge that its mother had surrendered everything for the illusion of safety. "No," she whispered. Ford's expression hardened. "Wrong answer." He gestured to his men, who moved to lift Sarah from the bed. Bethany protested, but they shoved her aside. They were going to take her now. during labor, when she was most vulnerable. The baby chose that moment to make its final push toward birth. Sarah felt the irresistible urge to bear down, to help her child escape the womb and enter a world that was already trying to destroy it. She gripped the bed frame and pushed with everything she had. Ford stepped back, suddenly uncertain. Even he wasn't prepared to drag a woman away in the middle of giving birth. His men looked equally uncomfortable, their moral boundaries tested by the reality of what they were witnessing. Eleanor Ford called toward the door. "Get in here and help." A woman appeared in the doorway, pale and trembling. Eleanor Ford, the banker's wife, carrying a medical bag with shaking hands. Her eyes met Sarah's across the room, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the shared knowledge of what it meant to be trapped by men who saw women as property to be acquired and controlled. The child crowned as Eleanor knelt beside the bed. One more push and a baby boy slipped into the world, red and squalling and magnificently alive. Eleanor caught him with gentle hands, her own tears mixing with the sweat on Sarah's face. "Beautiful," Eleanor whispered. "Perfect." Ford moved closer, studying the newborn with calculating eyes. "Healthy baby needs a safe home. Sign the papers, Mrs. Whitmore. For your son's sake." Sarah looked at her child, at the tiny life she and Isaiah had created, at the future Tobias had promised to protect. The baby's cries filled the room with defiant music, a sound that spoke of life persisting despite everything arrayed against it. She reached for the papers, pen trembling in her exhausted hand. Eleanor Ford watched with desperate eyes, silently pleading for some other choice. Bethany stood frozen, understanding that any movement might trigger violence. Then Sarah heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Many horses, riding hard toward the house. Ford heard them too, his head snapping toward the window, as dust clouds announced. "Arriving riders." Clay Mitchell's voice carried across the prairie, raised in a shout that brought hope flooding back into Sarah's chest. "Release Mrs. Whitmore now. We have evidence of your crimes." Ford cursed, his careful plan crumbling as justice rode toward them across the Texas grassland. Eleanor Ford stepped back from the bed, medical bag clutched to her chest as if it could shield her from what was coming. Sarah held her newborn son against her chest and smiled through exhaustion. The baby had been born free, and she intended to keep him that way. The reckoning had finally arrived. Ford's men drew their weapons as horses thundered into the ranch yard. Clay Mitchell led the charge, followed by Mama Rosie and a dozen ranch hands loyal to Tobias. Behind them rode Sheriff Polk, his face grim with the weight of confession. "Stand down," Clay shouted. "We have warrants." Ford backed toward the window, calculating escape routes. His carefully constructed plan crumbled around him as evidence. Mounted, Eleanor Ford stepped away from her husband, the medical bag still clutched against her chest. "You have nothing," Ford snarled. The word of hired hands against a respected businessman. Clay dismounted, pulling documents from his saddlebag, bank records showing fraudulent transfers, mining contracts with forged signatures, witness statements from 3 different sources, all corroborating the same story of corruption and murder. "We have Sheriff Polk's confession," Clay said. "Full details of the bribes you paid, the accidents you ordered, the murder of Isaiah." Beaumont. Polk stepped forward, badge removed from his vest. His face carried the hollow look of a man who'd traded his soul for silver and found the price too high. "I was there the night they killed Isaiah," Polk said. "Ford ordered it. Said the man was getting too close to the truth about the gold." The words hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. Ford's face went pale as his crimes were laid bare before witnesses. His men shifted uncomfortably, hired guns who'd signed on for intimidation, not murder conspiracies. Eleanor Ford spoke into the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "He made me help poison her tea, said if I refused, he'd kill me too." She looked at Sarah, holding her newborn son. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The apology carried years of suppressed fear. Eleanor had been another victim of Ford's schemes, trapped by marriage to a man who saw people as obstacles to be removed. Her testimony would complete the case against him. Ford drew his pistol, desperation making him dangerous. But Clay was faster, his own weapon clearing leather before Ford could take aim. The standoff stretched taut between them, 2 men representing different versions of justice. "Drop it, Ford. It's over." "Nothing's over. I still have the gold. I still have the power. You have nothing." The minds played out. The gold was never where you thought it was. Ford's confidence wavered. He'd based everything on the assumption that Sarah's land held the mother lode. If he was wrong, then Isaiah had died for nothing. The conspiracy had destroyed lives for an illusion. Clay pulled out one final document. A geological survey commissioned, in secret, paid for with Whitmore money, but conducted by independent experts. The results were devastating to Ford's dreams. "Your gold vein runs north," Clay said. "Under Whitmore land, not Beaumont property. You killed the wrong man for the wrong reason." The truth hit Ford like a physical blow. He'd orchestrated murder and corruption to steal land that held nothing of value. The real gold lay beneath Cornelius Whitmore's property, protected by legal deeds and established claims. Isaiah had died not because he'd found gold, but because Ford thought he had. The injustice of it broke something inside Ford. His careful facade cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. He'd gambled everything on stolen dreams and lost. His gun hand shook. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The weight of failed schemes and pointless murders pressed down on him until his shoulders bowed under the burden. "I was so close," he whispered. "So close to having everything. You had nothing worth having," Sarah said from the bed, her voice carrying the strength of a woman who'd survived everything he could throw at her. "And now you have less." Ford turned the gun toward her, one last desperate attempt to salvage victory from defeat. But Eleanor stepped between them, finally finding courage after years of submission. "No more," Eleanor said. "I won't let you hurt anyone else." The moment stretched taut as wire. Ford stared at his wife, seeing rebellion where there had once been compliance. Everyone else held their breath, waiting for the choice that would define the rest of their lives. Ford lowered the gun. The fight went out of him all at once, leaving him hollow as drought killed timber. He dropped the weapon and sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than his years. The price of evil had finally come due. Polk stepped forward with shackles, the irony not lost on anyone present. The sheriff who'd taken Ford's bribes now arrested him for the crimes they'd committed together. "Louis Ford, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the murder of Isaiah Beaumont." The words carried the satisfaction of justice long delayed. Ford didn't resist as the shackles closed around his wrists. He stared at the floor, perhaps seeing the ghosts of all the lives he'd destroyed in pursuit of gold that was never his to claim. Tobias arrived as Ford was led away, released from jail when the evidence cleared his name. He burst into the bedroom, taking in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Sarah in bed, exhausted but triumphant. The baby in her arms, healthy and beautiful. Justice finally served. He knelt beside the bed, reaching out to touch his son's tiny fist. The baby gripped his finger with surprising strength, holding on as if he understood the importance of the moment. "What's his name?" Tobias asked. "Isaiah Thomas," Sarah replied. "For his father and yours." The name bridged past and future, honoring the man who'd died and the man who'd lived to see justice done. Tobias's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. Cornelius Whitmore appeared in the doorway, hat in his hands and humility in his bearing. The events of the past days had changed him, stripping away arrogance and leaving something more human behind. "I owe you an apology," he said to Sarah. "I was wrong about everything. About you, about this marriage, about what really matters." Sarah studied his face, looking for deception and finding only honest regret. The gold beneath his land meant the Whitmores would remain wealthy, but wealth without family was just another kind of poverty. "We're family now," she said simply. "Family forgives." The words granted him absolution he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Cornelius nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. Mama Rosie entered, carrying fresh linens and the satisfaction of a woman who'd seen justice done. She'd gathered evidence, organized witnesses, and helped bring down the conspiracy that had killed her son-in-law. Her work was finished. "That baby needs a proper blessing," she announced, "and his mother needs rest." The room gradually emptied, leaving Sarah alone with her husband and son. Outside, the Texas sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The land that had nearly killed her now promised prosperity and peace. "What will you do with the gold?" Tobias asked. Sarah looked at her son, at the tiny life that represented hope for the future. The decision came easily, born from months of struggle and the knowledge of what really mattered. "Build a school. For all children, regardless of color. Give them chances we never had." The vision took shape in her mind. A place where learning mattered more than lineage, where children could grow up believing in justice and possibility, where love could cross any boundary and hope could survive any hardship. Tobias smiled, understanding the profound rightness of her choice. The gold would be put to its highest purpose, creating something lasting and beautiful from the ugliness that had tried to destroy them. 1 year later, Syrah stood beside the new schoolhouse, watching children of all colors play together in the yard. Her son toddled among them, still too young for lessons but already absorbing the atmosphere of acceptance and learning. Tobias worked beside the well he dug in their front yard, ensuring she'd never have to carry water again. The sight of him, sleeves rolled up and sweat on his brow, filled her with contentment deeper than gold. The school bell rang, calling children to afternoon lessons. Their laughter carried across the prairie, a sound of joy that would have been impossible without the struggles that came before. Syrah placed her hand on her belly, where another child grew. This one would be born into a world where love had triumphed over hatred, where justice had prevailed over corruption, where two people who shouldn't have found each other had created something beautiful and lasting. The pregnant black widow, who'd once hauled water for miles, had become a teacher, a mother, a force for change in a world that desperately needed it. Her story was one of survival, love, and the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility and anchored by love that had survived every test. The gold beneath the ground was valuable, but the love above it was priceless. And that is all to the story. For now, please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.